Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Masechnas Nedarim daf Gimel. We are going to begin on Gimel Amud Aleph by the third line, V'imois Ema Yadais. So we were learning at the beginning of this Masechta that there are three different types of Nedarim. One is the Iker Neder, in which a person makes a complete statement. For example, a person says, Hare Kikr Zeh Olai Carbon. And then it's possible you could use a kinui, which is a slang, which instead of using the word carbon, you use another word which is similar to it, in which, as the Ran we saw yesterday, there was a machlokas Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish, as we're going to see again, whether or not this kinui is something in which is actually from Umos Oil, from other nations, or that it's language that the Chachamim made up. Shabadu lahem Chachamim. And then finally, we learned about yados, which are incomplete phrases. But it's pretty clear, based on what you said, that you had the intention to make a proper neder. So even if you didn't finish off the sentence, you didn't say like a carbon, nonetheless, yados will work as well. So we were learning how come the Mishnah is framed in the way it is, that it doesn't even mention yados at all. It talks about kinuyim, but then when it starts explaining, it starts going into yados. So the way that we understood this is that, first of all, chasur mechsera, and in addition to that, it's possible that even though it starts talking about kinuyim and then yados, and sometimes we will go right into that which we mentioned and not go back to the first thing that was mentioned. And it varies. As we concluded in yesterday's daf, which we'll say again, that lav dafka zimnin mefarish ahu da pasek bereisha, zimna hu da sal mefarish bereisha. There's no necessarily guaranteed way that it has to be done, a specific way. And therefore, that's one answer. V'imois ema yadais aidi the asyan midrasha. The whole notion, and we're going to learn about what the drasha is on this daf, but since yados come from a drasha, because of that, mifarish l'hoin bereisha. So we mentioned that first. As we know that when it comes to something which is the drasha, which means that that individual came up with a chiddush, that's something which is chaviv, and therefore a person mentions that which is chaviv first, which is a new concept. So the Gemara asks, "V'liftach hadein bereisha." So begin the Mishnah with yados. Why does it mention first kinuyim mention yados? So the Gemara says, "Miftach pasach b'kinuyin deraisa bereisha." First of all, it mentions kinuyin, which has its source as a din deraisa first. V'hadam mefarish yados, and then afterwards it mentions yados. Yasla de midrasha. So I can understand if you say that a kinui is just another language, it's like a translation, so then that makes sense. It's really the same thing as the Iker Neder, which is Deraisa. If it's something with the Chachamim made, so obviously that shows it's not Deraisa, it's the Chachamim made these words. So if they made the words, L'chaira, Kinu is not Deraisa, so you should put Yados before Kinuim also. Where it says, Mikatani Yados, does our Mishnah say Yados? B'lav chasuri machasart? Well, we ended up saying before that there's words missing. Fine. So Aktem Nami Batini Yados, Kol Yados, Nedarim Kinedarim. V'chol Kinu Nedarim Kinedarim. Ve'el Hein Yados, Ha'ayma Chavera, Ve'el Hein Kinuim, Kainim Kainach Kainam. So you're right. What we could do is we'll tell you that that's actually how the Mishnah is supposed to be read. It should mention Yados first, and then mentions Kinuim, and then it talks about Yados and then Kinuim. So that's possible that that's in fact the case. Says the Ran, Ki pasach b'kinuim deraisa shechein derech hatana l'haskil b'devarim hayoidim v'pshutim. You start off with the basics and you build on that. But again, if you hold that really the din is that a kinui is a lashon shabado chachamim, so then there's really no difference because one's the Rabbanon, they're both the Rabbanon. Fine. So the Gemara then continues and says like this, which I wrote on the side, Masechtas Yados, because the name of the parak is called Kinui Nedarim, right? So the truth is, it should start off, the name of the parak should be called Kol, what did the Gemara say? It said Kol Yados, right? All right. Yados, Kol Yados, Nedarim, Nedarim. Okay. So it's possible that the name of the parak is not correct. Okay. V'yadais heichaksiv. So now the question is, where do we find this notion of this incomplete sentence that it works and that there's an allusion to it somewhere in the Torah? So we derive it from the following pasuk: Ish kiyafli lindor neder, nazir lahazir Hashem. Now, first of all, it's notable that it says lindor neder, which seems to be repetitious, redundant. Nazir lahazir is redundant. So, and also the change of the words. So there's a lot here that we can use as a drasha. But Tanya, so we learned nazir lahazir. When it comes to making yourself into a nazir, lasos kinoi nazirus kenazirus, v'yados nazirus kenazirus. So we're going to learn out from here that just like the ikar nazir, so too it works for yados and kinoi from this pasuk. So look at Rashi. Mefarsha kaman, rather the Ran, sorry. Mefarsha kaman she'im yarmer carbon. If you say the word carbon, chayshinan shema yaskir as Hashem, maybe you'll mention Hashem's name. The Hashem samach gabi carbon, because it says Hashem next to the word carbon. Kedechsiv carbon la Hashem. B'shema yaskir as Hashem, v'lo yaskir as carbon. And maybe you'll mention Hashem, you're not going to mention carbon. The Nimsa shahaitzi shim shemayim v'atala, you end up saying Hashem's name for no reason. L'kach chidshu l'shainos halalu. So that's the significance of the chidushim of these words. Fine. And then this seems like a little bit out of order. Ma'il kamemor, the next Ran, Einab pshutim yosim yados kedei shiasko behem Rabbi yados pshitit tvei yas midrasha. Okay. So ainli ela benazirus. So again, we only know. So let's jump down over here. The Ran down here. Tichsiv nozul hazer. Delav urcha dekrahachi. This is not the normal way. The olam hamakar kaidem el shem hapuula. Tichsiv eser iser l'kayim kol davar. So it really should say lahazer nazir. That's really the language of how it should be written. So again, we see that's also going to be ladrasha. Now, einli ela benazirus. So the first thing that again we derive from this pasuk of nazul hazir is the notion of kinoi and yados. So how about nedarim? How do we learn out nedarim? So b'nan Talmud learn ish ki yafli lindor neder, because the pasuk also says lindor neder. Nazul hazal Hashem makash nazirus l'nedarim u'nedarim l'nazirus. So we can make a connection to the two. What's that? Ma nazirus asaba yados nazirus kenazirus. That just like the nazirus, the ikar nazirus, it works obviously because that's the right way of doing it. So too when it comes to yados, that will also work. Af nedarim asaba hem yados nedarim kenadarim. So just like when it comes to nazirus, that's how it should be. So too, it could be with yados. So too on nedarim. Ma nedarim. So what can you learn out the other way around? Because when it comes to a neder, over babal yachel or babal ta'acher, a person who violates a neder is over bal yacher, and if you don't do it right away, you violate bal ta'acher, bal yachel, and if you don't do it right away, you're over bal ta'acher, which is usually through regalim. Different opinions, exactly whether it's three regalim or it has to be kaseder, shlokaseder. Av nazirus over bal yachel bal ta'acher. Okay, fine. So let's quickly look at a couple of questions before we get too far. We're up to man nedarim. So question TA8. Nazir she'achol This really should say Nazir she'achal navin be'ezel lavin hu oiver. Okay, so it's going to be bal ta'acher, or bal ta'acher, or bal yachel. Okay, those are the two. All right, and let's look at question 7. Man nilmad. What do we learn out from Nazil Hazir, the lav orcha de krahu? So one thing is either yados naziros, and we're going to see another answer soon. Okay. So also, when it comes to a neder, the father has the ability to be mefer his daughter's neder. He can annul it. So to a husband can do the same thing to his wife. So So it also, if his wife makes a declaration that she's a nazir, so the husband also can have that removed. So Maishna Gam Nazirus, the Ksiv Nazil Hazir. So Nedarim Nami Hoksiv Linder Neder, Vakesha Lamali. The whole Hekesh doesn't. Oh, how do we know Yados by Nedarim? Oh, only because we're comparing to Nazirus. What do you mean? It's the same incorrect order of having the way the action and the person should be reversed by both of them. So just like you learn out because of that drasha by Nazirus, the fact that it says the language of Nazir Hazir, you can say the same thing when it comes to Lindor Neder. So Ikos of Neder, Lindor, if it actually said Neder Lindor, Kidikosiv Nazir Hazir, in that way, Kidikamer, then you're right. Lotzar Chakesha. Bahasha Ksiv Lindor Neder, that says it that way, in other words, maybe the way that it says Lindor Neder is not something which you use as a drasha, because it's just repetitive, and sometimes the Torah writes it that way because that's how people speak. So therefore you need a hekesh to learn out yados for Nedarim. Hanichoman di Islay Dibra Torah Koloshim Yadam. Elaman Delaysle Dibra Torah Koloshim Yadam. I Lindor Neder Mayavadle. Well, Chayra, you should be able to use that as a drasha by itself, and you no longer need a hekesh. So the Gemara says, Darish le lasais yados nedarim kinedarim umakesh naziris lenedarim. So you can make a drasha to make yados nedarim kinedarim, and then you can make a hekesh naziris to nedarim. Okay, let's look in the Ran. Lindor neder mayavadle. Makshe hacha lindor neder mayavadle. Le'el b'samach akshe hakesh shalomali. So prepare kam the kedushin the mil so they ask me kabacham tarch v'chasabla kra. That sometimes, even if you can learn it from a Kal V'chomer, the pasuk sometimes mentions it anyway. So hachinami, so maybe also over here, mils yasa behakesha esher tarach v'chasav kra. Maybe even if you can learn it from a hekesh, sometimes the pasuk will, even if you can learn it from a hekesh, the pasuk will go out of its way to mention it. The efshel dechuye diavagav diakshin hu rachmana tarach lechta b'chol chad riboy yadais mishum hachi actually diadifa mina. The Givan the Kasav Rachman B'chol Chad Ribua Liyadais Lom Liyatan Lasmuchi Ahakesha. So again, the question is, why do you have to be Samach on the Hekesh? Well, you can just learn that directly. So Nazul Hazir Darshle. What else can be learned out from here? Malamid, it comes to tell you as we continue to Gimel Amid Beis that Shahanazirus Chalal Nazirus, which is the second drasha, either Yados Nazirus or that Nazirus is Chalal Nazirus. What does that refer to? So the Ran says like this. Going to Amr, a person says as follows: Hareini Nazir Hayoim. I'm a Nazir today. Hareini Nazir Hayoim, and he says I'm a Nazir today. Now he said it twice. Dulo Amrinan, we don't say the Masagale b'Shoshim Yoim, because a Nazir Stam Nazir says 30 days. So maybe he just means 30 days. That's it, and he just likes repeating himself. El Tzarech Limnois Shtei Nazirus. He'll actually have to do two sets of Nazirus. Tahainu Shishim, 60 days. But Nafgale Medechsiv Nazil Hazir Kolimer Kibel Lios Nazir. Once you accept yourself in order to be a Nazir, Eshel Hazir Oid Ukadeprecious. Even though you already are a Nazir, you can still make yourself into a Nazir for a longer period of time. So therefore, Nazirus is Chal. Nazirus is the second thing that is derived from these words. Okay, from the words of Nazil Hazir. So if you hold that the Torah is kosher b'nei adam, and therefore there's really no extra drasha, so v'nozul hazir dorish lasos yados nazirus, kanazirus, and we say that from the words nazul hazir, the drasha is to say yados nazirus is kanazirus, shanazirus chal al nazirus manole. So how do they learn out this second drasha? So hanicha isvir le commandir in nazirus chal al nazirus. Maybe it's not true. Maybe that din doesn't apply. Then it's fine. El Israeli commandim nazirus chal nazirus manole. How do you learn it out if you don't have that extra drasha? Because again, dibur kosher b'nei adam, so you don't have the extra drasha. So how do we learn out? Then nazirus is chal nazirus. So name a kra lizor. My lahazir shmamina tarti. So the fact that it could have just said lizor, the fact it says lahazir, so therefore that teaches us the second thing. So therefore it's shaykh that you can learn out two things from the same drasha, or from the same words rather, nazir hazir, and that's what it comes to tell you. First of all, yadois, and second of all, that nazirus is chal al nazirus. Now, but Merava Amri in Eretz Yisrael, they said that East Tana, there was a Tana de mapikle yadois, that they learned out yados min from the words lindor neder, that they actually learned out from Lindor Neder, not from the Hekesh. V'is Tana, the Mapikle min kol hayotz mepiv yaseh. And he also says that there's a Tana that learns it out from the words that kol hayotz mepiv yaseh. Whatever comes out of your mouth, you should do. So let's immediately look at the Ran over here. The key word is kol. So the Ran says, Hainu man di isli dir b'tar kolashon yadam. L'didei tarti shamina mina. You can learn out two things. Yados nedarim k'nedarim, v'neder shebatel miksaso batel kulo. A nether which is partial, mavatel part of it, the whole thing becomes batel. Fine. And that's what we learn out from kol hayotzi. Everything that comes out of your mouth you should do. But if you're mavatel mix, if they're a nether which is mavatel mixaso, batel kulo. If part of it is batel, then the whole thing becomes batel because it's the entirety of the thing. Neder shebatel mixaso batel kulo. Okay, so this is question 8. B'chol hayotz mepiv yaseh elu tarti halacha is nedarim nafkilim hakra ran. So again, yados nedarim and neder shebatel mixaso batel kulo. Okay. Omer Mar. Uma nedarim over b'bal yachol bal ta'acher. So we said before that just like nedarim, you can violate bal yachel and bal ta'acher. So too by nazirus. Now b'shlom bal yachel, if you don't do the thing by nedarim mishkachas chakayin di'amer kikar zu oichel. I'm going to eat this bread. V'lo and you didn't eat it. So over mishum bal yachel, you violated bal yachel devaro because you were supposed to eat the bread because you made a statement that you are going to eat the bread and you didn't eat it, so you violated that neder. El bal yachel the nazirus heichem shkachasla. How do we find bal yachel when it comes to a nazir? Kivandi amar hareini nazir tabali nazir. Once you say I'm a nazir, you're a nazir. So if that's true, achol if you eat kamle b'bal yoichel, you violated bal yoichel. Shasa kamle b'bal yishte, about not drinking. But you're not violating this term of bal yachel, l'chara bal yoichel, bal yishte. So how do you violate bal yachel? If you look in Rash, again the Ran, I have to get used to that. How do we find that's only bal yachel? The salkadait the chamina the chi hechi the nedarim leika el chad. Just like when it comes to a neder, you only violate one. Lav hachinami chadlav hachinami nazirus. So too when it comes to nazirus, the ilo l'shava hadadi, because otherwise they're not equal to one another. Okay. So it can't just be okay. Fine, maybe you're over bal yachel, but the problem is that you're not only over bal yachel, you're over bal yoichal, bal yishtet, omer rava, laver la b'shnayim. All right, so you're over more than one. So bal ta'acher, the nazir is heichem shkachas law. In the case of delaying, kivan the omer hareini nazir Havli nazir, you're already a nazir. Achel kamle b'bal yoichel. Again, let's say it the same. It's only one thing. Now, ba'omer l'kashe'ertze a nazir. When I want to become a nazir, I will become a nazir. So therefore, it's possible you delay. So v'iomer kashe'ertze like a bal ta'acher. If you say when I want to, so that you'll never violate bal ta'acher because maybe you will want to much later on in life. So Amarava could go into Omer lo after min oilam ad shehei nazir. I will not leave this world until I, at least at some point, was a nazir. Damin ha-hi shaita havile nazir. From that time, he is a nazir. Media havi ha'imel ishto, like a person says to his wife, harizu gitech sha'achas koidim isasi. I'm giving you a get right before, an hour before I die. Asul echel b'truma miyad. He's not allowed to eat truma immediately, because alma amrin and kol can't eat truma right away anymore. Because why? Alma amrin and kol shaita v'shaita dilma mayis. Maybe that guy is going to die right away, and therefore she wasn't allowed to eat truma. Hachanam alter havi nazir. Right away, he's a nazir. Amrin and dilma hashtamayis. Because maybe now he will die. We're actually going to stop there, but let's see a couple more questions. So at the bottom of the Ran says, Hachel alter kamle b'bal ta'acher. He violates it right away. Kivan shehisna. He made a condition. After min oilam, I will not leave this world. Mashma ta'achikamer. Hareilai limnois nazirus. I will count nazirus be'inyan shloi hechshash bedavar she'ashem nazirasi. So there's no concern that I will complete my nazirus. Koidim she'after min oilam. Which means I guarantee that I will certainly have completed my nazirus sometime before my death. You skip to the last line, Be'perikam ben Rosh Hashanah, hachanam li'achar gimel regolim, leisa, dil hosam omer harelai stam. Abul hacham, but over here, as we continue to the Ran and Dalam and Aleph, lo emer hachi, the imkain havile nazir la'alter. So that's how that's explained. Let's look at question TA8. So he says as follows, TA8, which I guess okay. So nazir sh'achal navim be'ezel lavin hu oiver. So now I understand what I wrote everything else. Bal toichel, bal tishte, bal tacher, bal yachel, and I wrote in parentheses lavor alav mishnayim. Okay, fine. So that is, in fact, somewhat of a correct answer. Let me just mark that down. That's TA8. And let's see if we have another question. Question TB9. Elu gimel devarim nilmodim mehekesh haprishus the neder nazirus. What are the three things that we learn out from one another? So one is yados, and bal yachal bal ta'acher, and hafar sa'av o habal, that the husband or the father has a right to annul the vow of the daughter and the wife, respectively. Ad kan.